How you doing today, guys? I want to tackle a question that I get pretty often, and it's a great question. That is, which do you feel is better, the Para 2 or the Spyderco Manix 2? Both of them are revisions of old models. So you know the paramilitary was out earlier, and then they revised it. Now it's the paramilitary 2. That could be for another video. And then also the Manix 2. The original Manix was a large lock bag version. Then they made the mini Manix, another thickly built lock back version. Well, then they went to the Manix 2, and now they have the Manix 2 XL. So they kind of replaced both those models. But the Manix 2, the one that you guys are used to seeing, pretty much is a revision of the old mini Manix. So anyways, let's just get right into it. Both are USA made. Both feature full flat grinds, unless you track down some of the earlier versions of the Manix 2, and you'll find the hollow ground versions out of 154 cm, which is not to be confused with CPM 154. This is regular ingot 154 cm. It's a great steel. It's not maybe what you would consider a modern super steel, but I think it's a really good EDC steel. Really nice fine particle grain in it, and loves to get stropped sharp. Showing you this knife. This is my wife's knife. She carries it every day for the past 2 years or so. When I first got started, she said, "Hey, I need something cool to carry." So went ahead and did this up for her. This is all the same piece of pink G10 all the way down, milled it out to make room for that lightning strike. Anyway, she loves it, carries it every day. Good stuff. Don't want to get distracted too much. Just know that you can find the Manix in the hollow grind. You will not be able to find them this fancy with the belt flats here, a rounded spine, blasted hollow grind area. But anyways, you can find this knife in hollow ground. The one drawback to this older version is no milled out liners. So this is a pretty heavy knife, but there's no lightened liners. How you can see in the newer versions, can you see that skeletonized liner? Takes off weight. So I've got these knives pulled down a little bit so that you guys can see when I start talking about locks. Anyways, they're both really similar. Overall, I do not think you can go wrong choosing either one. It's hard to find Manix 2 paramilitary 2s in stock, so you almost have to search the aftermarket and grab one there. Sometimes they're decently priced, and sometimes they're a little higher. Supply and demand and everything. Even the standard black version with satin blade is fairly hard to find in stock anywhere. Sprint runs usually you can get on somebody's waiting list and procure a sprint run that way at a reasonable price, but you know, you almost have to be real active in the community and hunt one down to get some of those sprint runs, or just get lucky and you'll see one on the aftermarket. All right, so let's talk about big differences first. Blade shape. You can see the Manix is more of a leaf shaped blade, so it's got that humped over fatter blade here, swoops down, which creates not quite as pointy of a tip as on the paramilitary 2. So straight spine on the paramilitary 2 makes for a little bit pointier tip. And I don't know if you guys ever use your knives this way. I have before, although it's not a big deal to like scrape something. Have you guys ever had to scrape and use the back of the spine? I don't know. I've done that before, but it's kind of hard to do when this is round here. I know, crazy, but it just come to my head. Full flat ground. Again, on most of the Manix 2s, they are full flat ground now. Even the standard black version with black G10 with, they switched to S30V, I believe. So anyways, they cut really similarly. Also, the actual blade length, if we line these up right here, are almost the same. It looks like the Para has a lot more cutting edge, but really that's just perspective. If I could stack them like that, you'll see they're almost the same. The Paramilitary 2 does maybe have a 1/16 of an inch on it, or so it looks on these particular two knives here. Anyways, let's not obsess about it. They're about the same. The edge shape is about the same as well. So it's this slightly upswept, a little bit of belly, a little bit of straight portion here. You can see that's pretty similar on the Manix 2, but it is more of a gentle sweep. They both work really well, especially for EDC tests. Both have large holes. Both have these large lanyard holes. Okay, no problem to put lanyards on. Let's get a look at clips, but let's not look at the wire version. Both rock the exact same clip. Yep. Both are about the same thickness. I don't really have a custom, I don't really have a plain version to show you. This is a little bit thicker than factory, I believe, but not by much. Anyways, kind of hard to do the review if I don't have one together to show you. As you can see, the FRN, remember this was just a touch thinner than the regular G10 version of the Manix, the Manix 2. You can see they're about the same. Blade thicknesses about the same. They might even be the same. Okay, I haven't mic'd them up and I haven't looked at the specs to see if they are the same, but they don't seem to be much different. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. Really, I think that you should buy this knife on how you like your ergonomics and also what you prefer your lock. To me, the Paramilitary 2 has the most perfect ergos that you could possibly ask for. No matter where you are, where I hold this knife, for me personally, it just feels like it was designed for my hand. It feels very secure with this thumb ramp that comes up. It's slightly jimped. And the way that this comes back out, flares back out, and flares out here for the palm swell, feels very comfortable in your hand. And then this extends out enough to come in the palm of your hand for any kind of hard use. Any kind of anything where you're really pushing down. Your whole hand is supported here by the knife. It's perfect. The Manix 2 is designed, I believe, just as well. You can see how it falls right into your hands here. Comes out for the palm swell. This kind of loops up and catches your pinky here. And then the way this comes up into the palm of your hand. And then you also have a choil on here. This is awesome. My one complaint is all the jimping they put all the way around these guys. You see all these jimps, and I'm not one for jimping. So I could do away with all that. Be perfectly happy. I do like this on the blade spine and under here on a choil. But to me it's just too much. It's too much. I don't know why you'd ever need that. It doesn't really do anything other than stick out and create a hot spot. Being how I went over this knife, I probably should have took care of that, but maybe I'll go back and do that for my wife. So, on ergos, they're really close, but I have to give that to the Para 2. I just do. You can see there's no excessive jimping on here. It's a little bit slimmer in your hand, and when you carry it, you can see it's a little bit slimmer than this, so it carries just a touch better. I'm talking about thickness here. You see how wide this is? When this is more of a streamlined. Camera froze, I don't know. We'll just keep going with it. So that's that. This again carries a little bit better. Ease of use. They're both smooth as glass when you use them. There's a little bit more resistance, I think, on the ball lock. We're going to look at that why in a few minutes here. But both are very smooth. Once you break past the detent, it just wants to fly out. But I do feel that the Paramilitary 2 is just a slight bit smoother. So again, you're going to have to give that to the Para. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm going to recommend the Para 2 over the Manix if you only get one. Let's look at lock. Let's look at the locks. Let's figure out what the ball lock actually is. And it is literally that. It is a ball that's encased in this plastic polymer piece. Can you see the ball bearing in there? On that spring, it's kind of hard to get a grip on the knife here to show you. But you can actually see how that rolls around the tang of the knife. It engages on the back of that spine. The blade stop is up against this metal piece here. And then the detent is when you close it, it falls into that little valley there. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Again, that's one of the things about these outside videos. Somebody's blowing leaves down the street. This is a really strong lock. I don't see how that spring could fail or unwind itself and lose all of its tension, but I guess it might be possible. I don't know. That's tough to say because I know Spyderco really prides themselves in this particular locking system, all their locking systems, and I know they test them to failure. So this is good stuff guaranteed, okay? Very well proven. It's very easy to use. Allows your knife to have a real smooth action. Again, when you roll that ball on that tang, you know, it's very smooth. Strong detent too. And you can just sling this back, right? And when you pull this back, it relieves that detent pressure. And you can just swing it forward. So if you like that on your axis lock Benchmades, this is real similar if you're not familiar with this lock. Let's move on to the Paramilitary 2. This is the compression lock. I've done a total video on this lock alone. I feel for the weight that you have to use to create this type of lock, I believe it's the strongest lock there is to date. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but hear me out. It's almost like a reverse liner lock. Most liner locks will engage on the bottom part of the tang. I don't really have a liner lock to show you. But here's like a frame lock. See how that engages on the bottom half of the tang? On this Chris Reeve Sabenza here. This is a liner lock that engages on the top part of the tang. And then it's ramped to allow for wear. Now it's a compression lock because if you were to put any pressure on this spine to try to get this knife to fail, that kicks up the rear tang and compresses it onto the blade stop, right? So when that levers up, that's where the compression part comes in. When that's jammed in there, any kind of pressure you put on this would only pinch that between there and there harder. Now I can see under heavy abuse, heavy spine whacking, you could crush a little bit of that lock tang, and you could create some up and down wiggle if you crushed it enough, and more so than what this tang is ramped for, to allow for the natural wear of that. Okay, so if that makes sense. But I don't see how this would fail and come all the way down and chop your fingers. I don't see how it could slip, okay? And I do feel this is stronger than a frame lock for this very reason, because the more pressure you put to come down, that heel kicks up and compresses on that. Again, done a whole video on why I feel this way, but we go over it again in better lighting. And I don't think you're going to blow through this stop pin out the top of the liners that is recessed in here. So when this pin is inside this liner, it's actually enclosed around there, and then the screw's kind of holding it there, so it's all one unit that works better when it's all together, and this is slid inside that liner. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Anyways, and then for the weight, this is just a pretty thin stainless steel liner. So I'd have to imagine it's hardened steel. I don't think Spyderco would use something that's not hardened on a necessarily, well, a part that should be hardened. So it's a necessity to have that hardened steel. So I just imagine that Spyderco does have that hardened steel. So also what you get, see that detent is pressed into that tang there. And the detent, well, I don't want to take this off because I got the screw here. That detent falls in the detent hole on the blade. So again, when you pinch this, you relieve all that pressure from the detent, and then your knife blade can just swing out. And you let go of it, bang, it's locked. So this is also very easy to operate. Very smooth, and you can see how it just falls once you relieve that lock. And you can also just flick it out. I can just pinch this and just fling it out, right? That's due to that lock. That compression lock is a gorgeous lock, especially for the weight. There is virtually no extra materials that go into creating that lock. And then to know that when you put more pressure on the spine, it locks it up even tighter. And I don't see how it could slip because you're pressing it together. Whereas, and I know this sounds crazy, if you put enough pressure on the spine, Chris Reeve does this lock the best, I feel. He kind of, the Reeve integral lock, right? He kind of invented it. This is what he does the best. But I can almost see how if you were to put enough tension on this, there's no compression there. This is only held by the friction of the lock bar face onto the tang of the blade. So in theory, with enough beating and banging or something that hit hard enough, I could see how this could slip. The tangs on these are already ramped, right? This is a very secure lock, and when you take into account when you're squeezing it and using it hard, you're locking it up even harder because you're creating more friction on that. I can still see how this could, in theory, slip off and fail. I don't see how that could happen with the compression lock. I just don't. I think it's a superior lock. I think it's one of the best locks on the market. The only thing probably stronger is the Cold Steel Triad lock. I just got to be very honest and give my honest thoughts. It's not to take away that this ball lock is very strong. But again, I could see how, in theory, that ball or the spring could lose some of its tension, and with enough downwards pressure could, if it's not engaged all the way, slip. But then again, this is also pretty much compression based, much like the compression lock. So as that heel kicks up, it only compresses that ball bearing into the top spine of this blade stop here, right? And creates that compression, but it's still a spherical ball bearing. So I do feel that the contact points, you can see where it rides on here. A ball, a sphere, has a very small contact area, right? On both sides. So the less friction you have on that up against something, it's more likely to slip. Okay? Not saying I've ever had a problem with the ball lock. Not saying that many people do. I'm talking under extreme abuse. I would bet that this would fail before this. Just my thoughts and theories looking at it. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure Spyderco is not giving out those failure numbers. I know they have them, you know, but I'm just trying to explain what I see here when I look at it in theory. I just feel that this tang has more contact area to the steel. It's this whole flat underside, and then it's on the top side that contacts up against that, whereas this has the bearing that's just on here, right? They're both great. They're both great knives. I don't think you can lose. Both have the bushing in here. Can you see it there on the underneath this pivot screw? So once this liner slides over here, again, it's encapsulated, I guess. It's encased, captured around that liner, which creates a really strong pivot because that bushing is buried through both sides of the liner. So now when you try to flex, I'm talking if this was the pivot of the knife, this is the liner, this is the other liner. Once you not just put it in the center there, but you actually bury it through both sides of that liner, and you try to flex this to get some side-to-side play, that's a really strong unit. Almost like an I-beam. If you take like plywood, particle board, OSB, it's not that strong, right? But once you take it and make an I-beam out of it, you can hold up the truss. You can make trusses for your roof of your house. It's a different thing when you construct it in that particular way. I feel it's the same way here with that pivot. That's a beautiful pivot. They both feature that. It's gonna be hard to see on this, but they do. Another thing that this allows, if we can get it to focus, see that pivot bushing there, is you can crank this thing down, the pivot, in theory, very snug, and it does not affect your action on your knife. Again, much like the traditional Sebenza 21. They've been doing that for a while. So I like that when you can tighten up these pivots, which should in theory stop the pivot from loosening up over time because you've already got it cranked down pretty tight. And then that spacer in there is ground with precision to allow that blade to still swing freely but not have side-to-side play. Again, these being $130 production knives, sometimes you'll get a pair too with a little bit of side-to-side in it, and then you really can't do anything about it because if you tighten this up, that spacer in there is creating the space, so you really can't tighten up that side-to-side action. So if you're ordering them new, or if you're getting it used or offhand or whatever, secondhand, ask. It's very important on these knives that feature that pivot. How's the side-to-side play? You know, of course, up and down. You don't want any up and down either, but That's important because there's not much adjustment in these pivots that have the bushings. Of course, there's tips and tricks that I could show you guys how to tighten them up and how to loosen the action by adjusting the width of the spacer or the width of the washers on either side. But we'll save that for another video. Get me some green tea there. This has been a long video, guys. But what I'm really aiming at is that first time Spyderco buyer. For instance, I have a cousin looking to get into a higher end knife. He's looking at the Spyderco Para, and I'm sure he's probably looking at the Manix too, thinking, you know, they're very similar, both about the same price, both made in USA, both full flat ground. I'm sure they cut about the same. What do I feel personally is better? I'm just gonna say there's a reason the Para 2 stays sold out everywhere, and this has been for 2 or 3 years so far. They cannot keep them in stock. That's not because they're crappy knives. There's not many on the aftermarket. People just love them. They keep them. Guys, I have knives, you guys probably know, that are worth way more than the Para 2s. Okay, Striders, XM18s. We could go on and on. Okay? Honestly, I still carry this Para 2 a lot, and I absolutely love it. If this is my beater Paramilitary 2, you can see some paint and stuff on it. Yeah, it's a beautiful knife. I think you would not be sad choosing either one, but if you just have to choose one, I think it's worth it to hunt down a Para 2. If not, the Manix 2 is an awesome knife. It's really near and dear to me because the Manix, the mini Manix, remember I talked about the one with the lockback, the mini Manix, big G10. That was my first higher end G10 Spyderco that I purchased a long time ago, probably 10 years ago or so. So this design kind of just does it for me. I still love it. But you're going to take one or the other away from me. I'm going to tell you to take my Manix 2s first and leave me with my Paras. Okay? So that's my honest thoughts. Again, a little bit stronger of a lock, and I do mean a little bit. I just don't see how it can fail. They're a little bit smoother. They're a little bit more fun to play with. I can do this with one finger, where the Manix you have to pull back with both fingers. Right? And they both feature all the stuff I love in a Spyderco. The larger hole. I love this large lanyard hole that they went to. The full flat grinds. Love that. Spyderco's heat treat's always on. That's another thing. Also, they're both USA made. But you can get the Manix 2 in all kinds of different steels, all different kinds of sprint run steels, different handle colors. They've made them in orange, they've made them in gray, black, all different kinds of colors. Moon glow on some sprint runs. The same with the Paramilitary 2. All different kinds of steel options. Of course, some are going to be really expensive to hunt down now. I believe the S90V Paramilitary 2s, I've seen them go for $350 to $450 now. So those are going to be hard to get. Even if you can only hunt down an S30V black G10 with a satin blade, you're going to still be very pleased. S30V is an awesome EDC blade steel. You're not going to be let down by that. Any of the specialties, yeah, totally go for them if you can get your hands on them. Some people have large collections of the Paramilitary 2, and that's for good reason. And some people collect the Manix 2s, you know. So, both great knives. Hopefully, this has helped you if you was trying to decide between one or the other. Ideally, I'd say get both. They're awesome knives. I feel they're different enough to warrant purchasing both, but I'm a little bit crazy. So, if you're only going to get one, I suggest the Paramilitary 2. That's it, guys. I hope you have a good day. We'll see you on the next one.